Welcome back, everybody, here at Real Bearded News with Sean and Miriam again. We are on to Scream 3. We're now on the base trilogy. We're super excited. How are you doing?
I'm great. I do like Scream 3, so I'm excited for this one. A lot of good characters, a lot of side characters that don't really matter, but they're part of the Stab franchise, so no one cares about that anyway. So I'm excited. What did you think about Scream 3?
I actually liked Scream 3 quite a bit.
Okay.
I like that they brought the Stab cast in. I thought it was fun and different, while also, again, still being within the Scream universe.
Right.
I just liked seeing the mirrored characters from Stab within Scream, because I think it just kind of brought new life to the characters, which is nice to see in a sequel instead of it just getting repetitive,
Right. Yeah, no, I think that was a very interesting thing to do, have the Stab cast, the Gale, the Sydney, the Dewey, all with the actual Gale, Sydney, and Dewey. It was a really good parallel of like what these characters are actually like versus the people who are portraying them, how they react to the Stab in real life. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. I did enjoy that. What did you think about 3 in comparison to 1 and 2?
I think they did a really good job of making it different. I really enjoyed 1 and 2, and then 3 brought in this whole new idea of a ghost face that was a little bit more calculated, which we've talked about a little bit before, especially because the ghost face now had a voice modulator to anyone's voice. So now you have no idea who it is, and like if anybody gets a phone call, you don't know who they're calling, if it's Ghostface or if it's the real person, I think that some of my favorite things about Scream 3 is that like now they're in the real world. They're no longer teenagers. They're not in college anymore. They're now into their just regular life. Sydney's trying to stay away from everything. Right. And she also has now, as her job, become a like crisis counselor, which I think is cool of her trying to work through what she's been doing and help other people. And then being pulled out of that hiding. So it's like there's no escape for her. But she's trying so hard to have that escape,
Yeah. What did you think about the opening sequence for this one?
I thought it was interesting. It was quite a bit different because usually we have just like that initial kill. One was with Drew Barrymore, kind of just the opening of Scream. Scream 2, remind me what happened at the beginning of Scream 2? I think it was...
Scream 2 was in the movie theater with
yeah.
Jada Pinkett Smith and... what's his name?
I'm not sure. But that was a pretty epic opening, I do have to say. But Scream 3 is now with characters that we know, which is the first time we've had that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting because it introduced that new voice module aspect to this specific ghost face.
Yep.
And having the girlfriend of Cotton Weary like totally not trust him. Especially because he apparently would mess around with her and be like, oh, I'm Ghostface. And for that to then turn back on him, for her to like almost kill him, honestly.
Yep.
And so we just get to see how Cotton Weary has changed and how that affects his life.
Right.
And also it also introduces the fact that Scream 1 and Scream 3 have a lot of parallels because Cotton Weary, I think in some way represents the killing of Sydney's mom because they were once a couple. And so there's that revenge factor in there from whoever this ghost face is to then start that cycle again with who they're killing, which you see throughout the rest of Scream 3.
Right. Omar Epps.
Okay, gotcha.
It's Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps, which I was happy when Jada Pinkett Smith got stabbed.
Oh my goodness.
She really was entangled on that one.
Ooh.
That was a terrible pun. Anyway, so the opening to 3 was pretty cool because it's one of the few times that we don't have a Stab opening instead of just a cold open. Not only that, but also having Cotton die really put this movie in a different light, in a different level. And this is when we start killing legacy characters. This is the beginning of a legacy killing because in the first one, Cotton was coming out of jail, freshly blamed for Sydney's mom's murder, and then in 2 he still is alive, and now in 3 it's like you're dead, you're gone. But my question is, do you think had he, because allegedly the reason that he dies is because he doesn't tell the Ghostface where Sydney's at or how to locate her. Do you think he would have survived, him and his girlfriend would have survived if he would have told where she was?
That's a good question.
Knowing who the killer is.
Yeah. I think that the killer is so bent on his plans and just the order in which he wanted to take everybody out. I think that not killing Cotton would have messed with his plans too much. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Ghostface had gotten the information and then killed him. Yeah. Like, I think that he was so focused on his plans that I don't think it would have mattered.
It would have mattered. Yeah, that's interesting because I think the same, because it would have been like the excuses, well, you didn't tell me where Sydney is, so now you die. But then the excuse would have been, well, you slept with my mom, so now you die. You know, so I don't know. I think he was just ass backwards, honestly. Yeah. Like this is one of those where there's a legitimate reasoning for the killings, but then there's also not a legitimate reason to do the killings. Yeah. Your mommy decided not to love you. Let's talk about how you were conceived, sir. You know, even Freddy Krueger became a killer because of the same reason. So, like, I get it. However, come on. You're a grown-ass man. Get over it. Mommy didn't love you. Who cares? But
yeah, I think it also goes within the line of Scream killer ideas, I guess, to kill people no matter what. Because, like, even with the phone calls, they'll be like, you have 3 questions. If you get one wrong, you die. And it's like, it's always that tiny thing that was not quite correct, and so you die. And so it's like, you have to be very specific. So I'm sure if he'd been like, oh, Sydney is here, and he's like, well, you didn't tell me what street she lived on, or you didn't tell me which room she sleeps in. Right. And it's like, well, you're dead. So
you didn't tell me the code for her alarm.
Yeah.
You're gonna die now.
Exactly.
So one of the things that you didn't like that you mentioned was that Roman being the mastermind of 1 and technically 2 by default. You didn't like that. Why?
I thought that it kind of took away the importance of Billy and Stu in a way. Like, it took away their credit, and it just kind of made them mindless followers, when I think so much of Scream 1, like, having seen that the first time, it was like, these people are really killing for, like, no reason. Especially, like, Stu, because Stu was like, it's peer pressure, man. I can't, like, I guess I'm just an impressionable kid. And so having Roman telling them what to do, I feel like makes it maybe a little bit less scary, because then it's like, oh, well, they just did what they were told, and they got some information, and that's it. And so, like, I think instead of having Roman being the mastermind and them just simply killing for one reason only, and it's like, your dad and my mom slept together, and that's why I want to kill you. And it's like, I didn't have anything to do with that. I didn't have control over that. Right. But instead, like, Roman telling them about all this stuff, I don't know. It takes the scariness out of it, I guess.
Yeah. But for me, it's just, it makes it even better in the sense of, like, because he didn't tell him who to kill, right? He just said, hey, check this video out, bro. Isn't that your pops? Oh, it is your daddy? Damn, that's crazy.
No way.
That's insane. What do you think you should do about that, since your dad left your mom, right? And you don't get to see your daddy anymore, right? Like, I think that's just a little more, like, a high level of manipulation. And so it's just nice.
That's fair.
I like that, because they again, he didn't tell him who to kill. He just said, hey, don't you want some type of, like, justice because your mom left your dad, or whatever the case was. And so he does kill Sydney's mom, so he gets his revenge. But then it's like, that's not enough. I want them to suffer the same way I suffered, which misery loves company, so that makes sense. Yeah. But then being able to go get yourself killed by the daughter of the woman that your dad slept with, it affects his mom. And then you have like a whole other, like, you didn't even intend for this to happen, but it happened. I think it worked out really well for it overall. So I think that works. I don't mind it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I stick with my idea, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, your idea isn't bad.
Yeah.
I just like the way that it went about it. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Totally.
Obviously Scream always has like this weird combination of like kind of comedy, but not really. And then just an element of horror, I guess. Did you think that in 3 was forced, any of those elements? Or was it just natural?
I think that they had to bring these new characters in. So from the Stab franchise, I think they had to bring them in, and in some way, I think it was kind of forced because it was like, where'd these new characters come from? But I think it came from a pretty natural spot because the killer was from the Stab franchise. I think if the killer had been like some other random person that wasn't related to it at all, I think that could have felt like it was more forced. But because it was all intertwined, having those Stab characters there, I think helped create this new idea of like comedy, especially with Parker Posey there, a couple of the other people who were playing the Stab characters. I think it was nice to have legendary characters on the line, as we saw with Cotton. But then we have these new Stab characters that we kind of already have a relationship with in like a more separated way, so that they were still able to die, and we like got to know them a tiny bit because they're playing these characters in a movie. So I think it gave them good people to kill off, you know, without it feeling forced. Maybe a couple times with Parker Posey, I was like, okay, it's kind of funny, but it's maybe too much. Yeah. Like, it's a little too over the top. But that's kind of what she's known for with her acting. Yeah. I did like the bit with Princess Leia, where they're like, oh, well, she's like, well, I almost got the part. It felt random, but I don't feel like it was forced. It felt so aware of itself that I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I do like the kind of like the meta commentary by mistake that they did, or on purpose that they did, with Scream 3, of like how these actors could portray badass people on screen, but they tend to be like the most dim-witted people on the face of the planet, or they'll have like mediocre jobs, like Carrie Fisher. She was a librarian, I think it was, of some sorts. And so it's the reality of Hollywood, right? Like, you go out there, you bust your ass, you might have 1 or 2 movies here and there, and then you work as a barista to make ends meet occasionally as you go ahead and you work on some type of acting stuff. So I thought it was pretty cool. The characters were dope too, but the humor was there. Sometimes it felt like, did you purposefully put this in there, or was this improvised? And when you have to question it, that's when it's probably a little too forced, right? And so good overall. However, on some aspects of it. What did you think about the characters that came back?
Like Dewey and Gail. I enjoyed it. I think that Sydney comes back. She's always badass. I think she's awesome. And she, I think, played her character really well because she came out of hiding and she's like, you know what? Let's just get this over with. Like, let's get this done. Let's get out and let's get Ghostface done with, you know? Yeah. I think that it was nice to see Gail and Dewey together. They did have some squabbling between each other. I thought it was kind of funny seeing Gail and Dewey and Jennifer all fighting over each other in a way. I think that I would have liked to see Dewey and Gail more in the fight with Ghostface because they end up getting tied up and then they're just kind of running around for that last fight scene that I'm like, I wish I could have seen them like really fighting more, because I think they kind of get taken out pretty soon. Yeah. And then we also get the detective in there who kind of becomes Kane. Yeah, he kind of becomes more in the main group further into the series because you know that Sydney and him end up together. Yeah. But it was interesting to see him in it. You definitely thought he was the killer for a little bit, which I thought was clever. But I think that they made Sydney such a badass, and then everybody else maybe was a little weaker than I wanted them to be. But I still really enjoyed it. I just enjoy seeing these characters on the screen. But I think having them have a little bit more to do with the fight would have been fun. But because there was only one Ghostface, there weren't really two to fight, which might be why it fell a little flat.
Okay.
For me.
That's fair. I think they did pretty all right with it. Obviously, as they have gotten older through the franchise, right? Like, they have been way better in having the agility and stamina to keep up with the serial killer for sure. So I definitely think they've done better. Like, they did good in 4 and 5 and 6. But this one was definitely one of the ones that you could say they were easily taken out, right? Like, it was clearly meant to push Sydney to the front of everything and make sure that she was the protagonist, even though all these other characters are coming back, but she's the one that needs to defeat it. And which was an old Hollywood trope where the last girl was the one that did everything and then the cops arrived. And so they definitely follow that trope, but it was okay. Like, it wasn't the worst thing that happened in this movie. Speaking about worst things that has happened in this movie, what'd you think about the twist?
The twist?
Yeah, the twist of this movie.
I thought it was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it was definitely a lot different than what they've done, because before it was the love interest and then it was the mom. So both of them were for revenge, and this is the first one in the series that's like for the recognition. Right. And so I think that it was an interesting concept to introduce into the film, because it was kind of the first time that it was like, oh, this is really affecting people and their lives aside from just Sydney and her friends. And I think it was cool to see just the one killer as well. This is the first and currently only time that we have the one Ghostface. Right. And it really introduced this idea of, like you said, a mastermind that has been pushing things along the entire time. I think it was also cool that we had those pictures at each crime scene of Sydney's mom, and for it to all add up in the end to this being Sydney's half-brother. Right. And I think that also introduces even more of this idea of family that we see within the next few Screams in this franchise. And we get to see how that desire for fame and recognition is pushing him towards that desire to kill Sydney and to get all of the things that she has,
Yeah, because it was definitely the first time that, because of jealousy, they want to kill Sydney. Because the first two were because of hatred, because of what her mom did. And then the third one is, well, I'm your half-brother and you're getting all this recognition for everything that you've done. I would be getting the same recognition if my mom would have accepted me. So it still has the mom aspect of it, but it's more over jealousy. And then 4, we have jealousy 100%. And so maybe we're only going to get 7 movies because it's like the 7 deadly sins, right? We have pride in here and envy. They're killing for envy. But that would be interesting to see. I did think the twist was good because it was more personal. Like, she never knew she had a half brother. She never knew her mom was such a promiscuous woman or what is it that they say in 6? What does she call herself? Sexually free?
Oh, yeah.
Sexually expressing herself?
Yes.
Which
sexually positive.
Sexually positive. Yeah. She didn't know her mom was so sexually positive, right? And so finding out that she has a half brother, I think had Roman reached out to Sydney, I think he would have had a much better life without that hatred of everything, right? Unfortunately, he would have probably died in the first 2 movies. But not only that, we have him also try to kill her because of reasons. Like, yeah, her mom, like, we understand that that he went out to his mom and tried to, like, have a relationship with him, but she gave him up for a reason. Like, he was a product of a rape type situation. And she didn't want to deal with anything that had to do with that time period. When she found Sydney's dad, she still wasn't satisfied, but it is what it is. And so it's like, you gotta, listen, I'm calling it how it was, all right? she was so sexually positive she could not just be monogamous. It's all right. It's okay. It's okay for the movie. All right. It is what it is. So just finding out that it was the brother, it was like, damn, like he's really willing to kill his sister. So that was tight. I did enjoy that.
Yeah, I think it was also interesting because I think this killer was the first one that I was like, should Sydney kill him? Because they're now blood relatives. Yeah. And so, like, Billy had gone crazy, and, like, I feel like that was a little bit different. It was a little bit, you're like, well, I mean, they love each other, maybe? I don't know. And then the second one, you don't really know the characters. There's not really a whole lot of attachment between Sydney and them. But then to have her half-brother attacking her, it's like, is it okay to kill family at that point? Because then it's, like, a little bit more of a morally tough situation, you know, instead of just survival. It's instead like, oh, and he feels like he's been like abandoned. Yeah, I feel like he's the first like sympathetic villain in my eyes for Scream, because I don't know, in my personal opinion, I'm like, oh, I want him to find happiness. His mom did abandon him. Yeah. But also at the same time, you're like, but he killed a lot of people. Yeah. So he can't stay on the streets.
That's fair. So. Yeah. No, but you've brought up a really good point where it's kind of like that gray area of should you kill family, or I would say Scream 3 is probably the first film that touches based on only because family is family doesn't mean that you have to deal with their toxic bullshit. So they were demonizing toxicity since I don't know what year this movie came out. 2001 or something. There you go. Wes Craven, man, ahead of his time. Oh, wow. So would you recommend Scream 3 to people who are fans of 1 and 2?
I totally would. Okay. Yeah. I think that the entire trilogy should be seen together. Scream 3 in particular, I think is just so much fun because it references Stab so much that it then feels like a film within a film almost, you know? And I think that has those elements that we like to see. We have that ghost face unveiling at the end. There's all the red herrings leading up to it. And at the same time, we have these new characters who we get to meet. And it's just a super fun movie, just like all the other Screams are, you know? And yeah, I enjoy it just as much as I do the other Screams. So I definitely recommend.
The ending of it, was it satisfactory?
I felt like it was actually really satisfactory. Okay. Like, I think that the trilogy could have ended there, in my opinion, because Dewey and Gail get together, and then Sydney kind of is at peace with herself, and it seems like she believes that the past is in the past. She's okay. She can keep going. She can live her life how she wants to instead of in fear. She ends up getting together with a detective, and I think it's just nice to see it resolve like it is. Like it did. Like it did. And so that's, I think, why I like Scream 3 so much, and just like that original trilogy of the resolution at the end, and probably a reason why I'm not as big of a fan of 4. Because it felt like it had ended. Yeah. Even though I enjoy that it continued. Yeah. But, yeah.
A Scream 3 dud well.
Dud well.
Scream 3 dud well. It dud end well. No, I agree. Scream. Here's the thing. I agree with you. You're 100% correct. It did end with a nice little like bow on top. You know, it's a nicely wrapped present. All loose ends are. That's it. We find out that because of Roman, we get Scream 1. Because of Scream 1, we get Scream 2. And now he's like, you know what? These two people they sucked. Let me do it myself. That all makes sense. However, I will say it ends too perfect. And so I'm okay with Scream 4, 5, and 6 because that Scream 3 ending is way too perfect. It's too happy ending. And I think we were coming out in that era, if I remember correctly, we were leaving that era of things ending too perfectly. Because then shortly after we get movies like Drag Me to Hell that ends in a very interesting note. And so it was good that it continued because it didn't end it with too much of a perfect ending. Does Sydney deserve a perfect ending? Yes, she does. She survived so much shit for like 25 years now. but Scream 3 was not the place to end it at.
I do agree with that, and I'm glad that they continued.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you make a really good point. Yeah.
So what would you rate it?
I think I give this one like a 4 out of 5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I just enjoyed this one so much more than 4, as we've already talked about. And I think that it introduced so many new elements into the Scream franchise without it feeling like it's going over the top or it doesn't stick to the formula in some ways. I also loved the nods back to Scream 1. They have the set that Sydney runs onto, and she gets chased in the house by Ghostface, just like the scene in Scream 1, which I thought was clever nod to the original. I think the only things I would say would take away from it would be, like we talked about, some of the humor was a little forced, and I think that this is the voice changing, like voice modulator, where it could be anybody, felt a little far-fetched, and so that's why I deducted a couple points, but I thought it's a great film. I loved it. 4 out of 5.
That's fair. I also give it a 4 out of 5. I think Scream 4 is the only one that's going to get anything lower than a 4. Because Scream 3, as much as I was like, hey, it's too much of a perfect ending, all that stuff, all those little like red strings that you could pull to lead you somewhere, it led you to somewhere, and it ended well. It was the first time that we've seen that Sydney is learning from her past experiences of all these people returning after you shoot them a few times. She's picking up the tricks of the trade here and there, and then she's applying them to herself to be able to survive. This is what really made her a good survivor. Which the fact that they ended it there, knowing that in Scream 4, Kirby was supposed to be the new Sydney and try to like push a franchise with with Kirby forward, that would have been nice, because like Sydney could have ended it there, been like, hey Kirby, you know what to do, you survived now, so you do you, and she could have been her mentor, and so we'll see Sydney like occasionally, but not really being attacked. I think that would have been a good direction. Maybe that is the direction that Wes wanted to go to, but it has really good suspense in it. It has a great story. You like the fact that you feel bad for your killer, who's been killing constantly, who has manipulated events from the past that caused a lot more killing as well. The fact that you feel bad for him at the end of it, and you're like, damn, like he should have had another chance. That just tells you it's a really good story, and they all play their part really, really well. And so for me, that's why it gets a 4 out of 5. But I look forward to seeing where the franchise goes, knowing how 4 and 5 go, and 6, seeing if they do a 7, how are they going to go ahead and create a story from there? Is there anything from 3 that you would have changed?
Let's see. I think, like I said before, that I would have liked to see a little bit more of Gail and Dewey. Even though especially now that we've talked about it, it's that we're pushing Sydney to the front to have her confront what she's been going through over so many years. I think it would have been nice to see Gail and Dewey maybe fight a little bit more before Sydney got there. If we had extended that fight scene a little bit more, and if they'd been a little bit stronger, because like Sydney, we totally see how she's learned and how she's gotten better over the years, but I feel like they didn't quite do justice for Gail and Dewey in the third. But I think in the 4th, 5th, and 6th they did, but 3 in particular stood out to me for it being maybe not quite as good to Dewey and Gail. So, because I think the fight scene was semi-long, but I just think that they should have been smarter than they were.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely got caught with that voice changer. So, which I really do want to own one.
Yeah, you said that a lot.
I want a voice changer like that. That's pretty dope. I want that one specifically, so like that could sound like anybody. Go back to college, be like, hey, no, A+ is all around. My bad. But that is it, though. 4 out of 5s from both of us. Yeah. First time we've agreed on a rating. Yep. We didn't even talk about it before. We just gave it a 4. You're learning. But between the next time that I see you and I tell you what you should be watching, what you should be avoiding, don't forget, Keep reading those comic books. Keep watching an anime. Rock and roll. And above it all, stay nerdy, guys.